Let's discuss this further with the CEO of the Council for the Built Environment, Dr. Msizi Myeza, who joins us now for more. Dr. Myeza, good evening. Thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. The failures here are quite staggering in that preliminary report. And one would assume that the sanctions would be equally as staggering. What role do you have as a statutory body to hold to account the executing agency for what is quite literally not just poor workmanship, but also negligent workmanship?
Thank you, Dixon, and good evening to your viewers. Look, I think one of the challenges that we are grappling with in the built environment and construction sector generally relates to how do you link professional capability and criminality. And I think you'll note that during our media briefing today, we've demonstrated that there has been a series of similar incidents in this city, but it's not an isolated incident. We also just had the recent one in George. However, all these incidents point to one of the fundamental challenges that must be resolved on how do we regulate the built environment as a country, because we've got a plethora of legislations that sits in various departments. And unless you have a stronger coordinated effort as a state, these shortcomings are likely to happen. So from where we're sitting as a built environment, we think there are critical interventions that should be looked into urgently by the state, including the profession itself or the sector. One of them is that we need to accept that in 2025, it should not be a norm that buildings collapse. Secondly, we should better coordinate ourselves as a sector where we have a single view of the entire ecosystem. Let me just demonstrate, Dixon, quickly. There are various entities that are responsible for various sections of the construction value chain. The Department of Trade and Industry is the custodian of the National Building Regulations, which is what enables all of us to construct structures. The Department of Labor is the custodian of health and safety, which gives you a permit to commence with the construction, as well as issuing the occupant certificate at the end. Local government is a custodian of municipal planning, including development planning processes. Public Works is a custodian of the built environment, professions, as well as the construction sector. So all the professionals that are involved in the construction value chain reside within the built environment, which is the entity that we administer. So you can tell that unless all of those actors act in unison, such gaps that we are seeing emerging are likely to continue in the future. So our proposal that we've made is that there must be a single regulator that looks at the entire value chain in the construction sector. So those are measures that we put in place. And I do know that government, through the ministry, is engaging on this matter.
I mean, absent of a single regulator, I still don't see why there couldn't be much closer regulation or coordination on your part between two organizations, the NHBRC, which has regulatory and statutory powers, and the CIDB, which has regulatory and statutory powers to hold to account and to regulate those who act and perform in the built environment, particularly in the construction built environment. My question then to that is, what efforts are being done to coordinate the regulatory efforts between these two people? Because it seems to me, if there were a lot more proactive inspections, for instance, that we will have fewer building collapse.
Look, you're correct. And I was just painting a picture that you accept that government is a huge system. And I think some of the observations that have emerged on the work that we've done on the George building collapse have actually pointed out to the point that you're raising. For example, the NHBRC would have undertaken its investigation, but that relates to commercial or residential properties that are registered or administered through property, we call them home builders. And there's a different process on how home builders are administered. Whereas in the case of the CIDB, It's the construction or contractors. And those are players that play into the same space. Sandwiched by that, professionals whom you find in both instances that are actually part of the home building program, and in the construction space, be it or dams, you also find contractor or professionals who are operating that space. The point really that we actually have accepted collectively in the sector is that the fragmentation that we see is not sustainable into the future, because the profession or the sector that we are regulating has changed. And therefore, we cannot continue with the rules that we set out in 1977.
Dr. Myeza, there are a lot of
profession.
Look, there are a lot of structural reforms and a reconfiguration of the sector and its bodies that need to take place. I think that's quite trite from the point you're making. But my question is, why could the sector not be a lot more proactive? And I asked a very pointed question. If there were more proactive inspections and inspectors deployed, we would see far fewer buildings collapse. Granted, the city of Durban and many local government municipalities have a duty on their part to execute the bylaws that govern that city, which clearly was flouted in this instance as well. But as industry bodies and regulators, surely you carry a responsibility to be a lot more proactive in inspecting construction sites.
No, correct. Let me give you a scenario, because I think maybe I'm not addressing your question correctly or pointedly. A city of eThekwini today revealed that they've got 60 inspectors. That's a metro of eThekwini. You can imagine in Jozini or in Vryheid, which is a smaller municipality, how many it's. When we're engaging with the Department of Labor, Deputy Minister Sibia indicated that the Department of Labor has 2,000 inspectors across the country. And you can tell that the number is not enough. So there is an issue of capacity that must be built over time. To build that capacity requires proper training. Hence, if you read our statement that we issued today, we are proposing that there must be community-based involvement on how these matters can be monitored. You can't tell me that, Oliver, that in a building in Verulam, a 4-story building in a mountain can be built, and a ward councillor, a ward committee member, a community member does not know. Some of the issues that we're putting forward is that communities must be vigilant. So if you see a structure coming up without a notice or a board next to it, that should give you signal, because all structures that are legally under construction must have a board that construct the professional team, including the developer, and that will give.
Oh, seems like we've lost Dr. Myeza there. The line had just cut with us there. But that is Dr. Msizi Myeza, who is the CEO of the Council for the Built Environment, talking to us on the Verulam building collapse report.